twins beg Farmer for help, but discover something about his past. Thomas Anderson gazed at the horizon of his vast property with weary eyes, the weight of years and secrets bowing his shoulders. Peaceful Haven Ranch, one of the largest in the Sacramento region of rural California, had thrived under his leadership, but loneliness and regret were now his only companions. It was on a scorching morning that two boys appeared at the main gate, thin, dressed in worn-out clothes, their faces smudged with dirt. They looked as if they had walked for miles. Thomas watched from the porch as Raymond, his trusted foreman of over 30 years, tried to shoo them away. "Please, mister, we just want to work," said one of the boys, the slightly taller one. "Yeah, we'll do anything. Clean, carry stuff, take care of the animals," added the other, with the same blue eyes and blonde hair as his brother. "This ain't no charity house, kids. Scram!" Raymond raised his arm threateningly, making the boys step back. Something about the scene stirred an old memory in Thomas. Without a second thought, he descended the porch steps with a swiftness that surprised even himself. "Raymond, let the boys stay." His deep voice echoed across the yard. The foreman turned, stunned. In 20 years, Thomas had never allowed strangers on his property, much less begging children. "But Mr. Anderson, you always said no outsiders. I'm telling you to let them stay." Thomas approached the boys, who couldn't have been older than 7. "What are your names?" The twins exchanged a glance, as if silently consulting each other before answering. "I'm Ethan," said the one who had spoken first. "And I'm Nathan," added the other. "And your parents?" Another shared look between the brothers. "We don't have any, sir," Ethan replied, lowering his head. "We lived with Miss Betty, but she got sick and now we got to fend for ourselves." Thomas studied the children for a long moment. There was something familiar about those eyes, something he couldn't explain. "You can stay," he finally declared. "Raymond, set them up in the workers' shed and give them light chores. They're just kids." The foreman nodded reluctantly, casting a suspicious glance at the boys before walking away. Margaret, the housekeeper who had worked in the main house for nearly 40 years, watched everything from the kitchen window with a puzzled expression. When Thomas returned inside, she couldn't hold back her question. "You've never let outsiders stay here. Why these boys?" Thomas ran a hand through his graying hair and shrugged. "I don't even know myself, Margaret. Something tells me they need to be here." In the days that followed, the twins showed an impressive willingness to work despite their young age. They rose before dawn and tackled every task with dedication, no matter how small. What surprised everyone most, however, was how naturally they connected with the animals, especially the horses. "Never seen anything like it," remarked Frank, one of the oldest ranch hands, watching the boys with Thunder, the black stallion even Raymond couldn't tame. "It's like they speak the animals' language." Thomas, who observed the scene hidden behind a tree, felt his heart tighten. His daughter Emily had had the same gift, the same way of whispering in horses' ears, the same gentle touch when stroking their muzzles. Emily, who had been gone so long, leaving only emptiness and unanswered questions. Meanwhile, in the main house, Margaret was organizing an old closet when a yellowed photograph fluttered to the floor. Picking it up, she froze. In the picture, Emily smiled beside a young man during a ranch celebration. Her eyes were identical to those of the twins who had arrived. "Good heavens," murmured the housekeeper, quickly tucking the photo into her apron pocket. During dinner, Thomas noticed Margaret's uneasy gaze as she served the food. "Something wrong, Margaret?" "No, sir," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "I'm just worried about those boys. They need to go to school." Raymond, who dined at the main table as the trusted foreman, cut in sharply. "School? They're here to work, not study. They already get free roof and food." "They're children, Raymond," Margaret countered. "It's against the law to keep children working without schooling." Thomas thought for a moment. "Margaret's right. Tomorrow I'll speak with Principal Warren at the elementary school. The boys will attend part-time." The foreman slammed his fork onto his plate with unnecessary force. "So you're changing too much, Mr. Anderson. These kids have been here less than a week and they're already turning the ranch upside down." In the workers' shed, the twins whispered to each other, lying on a makeshift mattress. "Do you think he suspects anything yet, Ethan?" Nathan asked so quietly it was barely audible. "I don't know, but the lady of the house looks at us funny. I'm scared. What if they find out we—" "Shh! Someone's coming!" The door opened and Raymond entered carrying a lantern. "You two, tomorrow you'll clean the whole pig pen and then help fix the south pasture fence. And no complaining, hear me?" The boys just nodded silently. "That's right, stay sharp, I've got my eye on you. Try anything funny, and you'll regret ever stepping through that gate," he threatened, before slamming the door behind him. Ethan gripped his brother's hand. In the dark, "It'll be okay, Nathan. We found the place. Now we just need time." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Mark Twain Elementary was a modest building in the village near the ranch. When Thomas arrived with the twins in his pickup truck, the local children stared curiously at the newcomers. Principal Warren, a middle-aged woman with a stern appearance but kind eyes, welcomed them into her office. "Mr. Anderson, what a surprise to see you here. It's been years since you visited the village." "Exceptional circumstances, Warren," Thomas replied, gesturing to the boys. "These are Ethan and Nathan. They're under my care now and need schooling." The principal studied the boys carefully, noting their worn clothes and calloused hands. "Do they have documents? Birth certificates?" Thomas hesitated. "Not yet. They were taken in by a woman who passed away." Warren sighed. "I see. We can enroll them temporarily, but you'll need to sort this out, Mr. Anderson." The twins were accepted into the school, though they could only attend in the afternoon due to their morning ranch work. To the teacher's surprise, despite never having formal schooling, the boys showed sharp intelligence, especially with numbers. "I've never seen children pick things up so fast," remarked teacher Jessica during recess. "It's almost like they've been exposed to this material before," Warren agreed, watching the twins play in the yard. "And did you notice how they know the old local stories? Yesterday, Nathan mentioned the legend of Wishmaker Falls, with details only the longtime families here would know." Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Margaret continued her quiet investigation. Taking advantage of Raymond's absence, she went down to the basement where the Anderson family's old belongings were stored. Inside a locked cedar chest, she knew Thomas kept mementos of his daughter. With a key she had hidden years ago, she opened the trunk and carefully removed the items. Emily's dresses, letters, photographs. Her fingers brushed against a small leather-bound album. Opening it, she found the image she was looking for. Emily at 18 at her birthday party. The resemblance to the twins was undeniable. The same eyes, the same face shape, even the small mark near her right eyebrow. "So it's true," she whispered to herself. The sound of footsteps made Margaret quickly put everything away and leave the basement. In the hallway, she ran into Raymond, who eyed her suspiciously. "What were you doing down there, Margaret?" "I was looking for some old sheets to make. Floor rags," she lied, gripping her apron tightly. "The rains are coming and we need to prepare the house." Raymond stepped closer, intimidating. "You've been awfully interested in those boys." "Why?" "They're just children who need help, Raymond. Something you'd never understand." "Watch what you say and do, Margaret. This ranch has run just fine for years without outsiders. I don't want trouble now." That afternoon, an unexpected storm swept over the region. The twins were walking home from school when the downpour caught them on the road. They ran for shelter, but as they passed by the riverbank cutting through the property, they heard a desperate cry. "A calf!" Nathan shouted, pointing to the young animal that had fallen into the water and was being swept away by the current. Without a second thought, Ethan threw his backpack down and ran to the bank. "Ethan, no, the water's too strong." Nathan tried to stop him, but his brother had already jumped in. With great effort, Ethan managed to reach the calf and push it toward the bank, where Nathan helped pull it out. But when Ethan tried to climb back, the current dragged him several feet before he could grab onto a branch. "Hold on!" Nathan yelled, running along the bank to find help. Luckily, Frank and two other ranch hands were working nearby and managed to rescue Ethan, who was unconscious and freezing. They carried him straight to the main house. "Good heavens, what happened?" Margaret exclaimed when she saw the boy unconscious and soaking wet. "He saved a calf from the river but nearly drowned," Frank explained, laying Ethan on the sofa, cold as ice. Thomas, who had just arrived from town, walked into the room and saw the scene. His face turned pale. "Call Dr. Mitchell right away," he ordered, taking off his own coat to cover the boy. "And bring blankets, quick!" Nathan, drenched and shaking, held his brother's hand with desperation in his eyes. "Please don't let him go," he begged Thomas, tears streaming down his face. "He's all I have." Something in those words struck Thomas like lightning. Without hesitation, he sat beside the boy and took his other hand. "He'll be fine, Nathan, I promise." Dr. Mitchell arrived in less than half an hour, unusual for the area's standards. He examined Ethan carefully as everyone waited in. "Silence. Pneumonia, no doubt. He'll need antibiotics and constant care. The next night will be critical." "Will he be okay?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking. The doctor smiled gently. "If he's as strong as he seems, yes. But he needs plenty of rest and warmth." To everyone's surprise, Thomas insisted Ethan stay in the guest room of the main house, not the workers' quarters. More than that, he spent the night by the boy's bedside, checking his temperature and making sure he took his medicine. Margaret, bringing Thomas a cup of tea in the early hours, found him dozing in the armchair beside the bed. She heard him murmur in his restless sleep, "I won't lose you again. I won't." The housekeeper covered the boss with a blanket, and while sorting through the boy's wet clothes to wash them, found something sewn into the lining of Nathan's pants pocket, half of an old silver locket with a partial design that seemed familiar to her. The next day, Ethan woke up with a high fever. Nathan, who had slept on the floor beside his brother's bed, refused to leave the room even to eat. "You need to eat, child," insisted Margaret. "Only when he gets better," Nathan replied, clutching his brother's hand. Raymond appeared at the bedroom door, watching the scene with his usual scowl. "So much trouble over a boy who isn't even yours, Mr. Anderson," he remarked, leaning against the doorframe. "And now we're short one hand for work." Thomas rose from the armchair, staring at the foreman. "These boys work harder than many grown men on this ranch, Raymond, and saving a calf worth good money deserves some consideration, don't you think?" The foreman looked away, clearly displeased. That afternoon, while Ethan slept under the effects of the medicine, Nathan finally agreed to leave the room to eat something. In the kitchen, he found Margaret preparing chicken broth. "This will help your brother regain his strength," the housekeeper explained, stirring the pot. The boy nodded silently. "Nathan," Margaret whispered, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "What is that thing you keep sewn into your clothes?" The boy paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "It's a locket, isn't it? Half of a locket." Nathan swallowed hard, his eyes welling up. "It's the only thing we have but from our mother. Miss Betty said we were left with her as babies with this broken locket. She said maybe one day we'd find the other half." Margaret hugged the boy, who finally let his tears fall. "I'm scared of losing Ethan. He's my only family." "You won't lose him, dear. And maybe you have more family than you think." Over the following week, Ethan slowly recovered. To everyone's surprise, Thomas began spending much of his time with the boys, telling them stories about the ranch and teaching them about farm work. One evening after dinner, he invited the twins to the living room where an old grand piano had sat unused for years. "You know, my daughter Emily loved playing this piano," he remarked, running his fingers over the yellowed keys. "She had a natural talent for music." The boys watched the instrument in fascination. "Do you know how to play?" asked Ethan now, recovered but still hoarse. "Just one melody Emily taught me," he replied, sitting on the bench. "It was her favorite." Thomas began to play a sweet, melancholy tune. To his astonishment, the twins started humming along as if they knew it. How do you know this song?" he asked, abruptly stopping. The boys exchanged confused glances. "I don't know," Nathan answered. "We just do. Miss Betty used to sing it to us at bedtime." Raymond, who was passing through the hallway at that moment, froze when he heard the melody. His face hardened. As he entered the room, he deliberately bumped into a side table, knocking over an old crystal vase that shattered on the floor. "Sorry, Mr. Anderson," he said. not sounding the least bit remorseful. "Let me clean that up." As he bent to pick up the shards, something fell from the bottom of the vase. A hidden compartment revealed a yellowed, folded paper. Raymond tried to grab it quickly, but Margaret, who had entered the room upon hearing the noise, was faster. "I'll clean this, Raymond," she said firmly, discreetly slipping the paper into her pocket. Later in her room, Margaret examined the document. It was an old bank receipt confirming a substantial transfer to Raymond, dated 8 years ago, with a handwritten note, "Matter H, resolved definitively." The next morning, the twins were wandering through the house when they stopped in front of a large portrait on the wall of the main hallway. A young woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes, smiling at the painter. "Who is she?" Ethan asked Thomas, who was approaching. The rancher hesitated as if the question pained him. "My daughter Emily, she left a long time ago." "She looks sad," Nathan remarked, studying the painting closely. "Sad?" Thomas stepped closer to the portrait, as if seeing it with new eyes. The painter captured a perfect smile. "The smile, yes," Nathan insisted, "but her eyes are sad." Thomas stared intently at the boy. "You're far too observant for your age, Nathan." During lunch, the tension was palpable. Raymond ate in silence, casting suspicious glances at Margaret and the boys. Thomas, meanwhile, seemed lost in thought. "The boys have been here almost a month," Margaret commented, trying to break the silence. "I think it's time we bought them some new clothes." "They have enough clothes," Raymond retorted. "They each have 2 sets, all patched up," the housekeeper replied. "It's not proper." Thomas nodded. "You're right, Margaret. Take them to town tomorrow and get what they need." The foreman slammed his fork down. "You're being taken for a fool by these kids, Mr. Anderson. Just yesterday I caught them snooping through your things in the office." The twins' eyes widened. "That's a lie," Ethan protested. "We never went in there." "Liars!" Raymond shouted, standing up. "And I can prove it. Come with me." Everyone followed the foreman to Thomas's office. Opening a desk drawer, Raymond pulled out a gold watch. "This watch was on your dresser yesterday, Mr. Anderson. I found it hidden under the mattress where these 2 sleep." "That's not true," Nathan cried, tears in his eyes. "We never stole anything." Thomas looked at the boys, then at the watch. Something didn't add up. "How did you know the watch was on my dresser, Raymond?" "I never say where I keep my things." The foreman hesitated for a moment. "I saw you put it there the other day." Before Thomas could respond, a noise came from the ranch entrance. It was Principal Warren from the school, accompanied by the teacher Jessica. "Mr. Anderson, forgive our unannounced visit," Martha said, looking concerned, "but we need to talk about the boys. They haven't been to school the last 2 days, and we were worried." Thomas briefly explained Ethan's illness, while Raymond watched the visitors with clear irritation. "I understand," Martha replied, "but there's something else." Teacher Jessica made an interesting discovery. Jessica stepped forward, holding some books. During a family history activity, Nathan mentioned a lullaby he's known since he was a baby. It's a very specific song, a unique composition of the Anderson family. One Emily, your daughter, used to sing to the children at school when she taught music. A heavy silence filled the room. Raymond visibly paled. Thomas turned to the twins. "Is it the same song I played on the piano?" The boys nodded, confused by the situation. At that moment, Margaret entered the room. "Mr. Anderson, I think you need to see this," she said, handing him the document she'd found in the vase. It was hidden in the living room. Thomas read the receipt, his expression growing darker. "What does this mean, Raymond? What matter H was resolved definitively?" Raymond stepped back, looking for an escape. "It's nothing, Mr. Thomas, old things, business." "Business with my daughter Emily?" The rancher's voice trembled with anger. Right around the time she disappeared, sensing they were in the middle of something serious, Principal Warren tried to lead the boys outside. "Come on, children, let's wait outside." "No," Thomas ordered. "They need to hear this." Turning to the foreman, he continued. 8 years ago, my daughter Emily told me she was pregnant. Blinded by pride and old-fashioned thinking, I kicked her out of the house. She left, swearing she'd never return." His voice broke. But you, Raymond, said you'd found her months later, that she'd asked for money and promised never to come back or make contact. You even showed me a letter, supposedly written by her. Thomas gripped the receipt tightly. It was all a lie, wasn't it? What did you really do to my daughter, Raymond? The foreman, cornered, let out a nervous laugh. I did what you secretly wanted, Mr. Thomas. She was coming back, yes, coming back with 2 babies in her arms to shame you in front of the whole county. I just helped her change her mind. Margaret covered her mouth with her hands. The twins, though not fully understanding, clung to each other. Did you hurt her? Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. Son, of course not, Raymond replied, offended. I just convinced her to go her own way with a little persuasive financial help. As for the babies, well, she was weak after childbirth, feverish. It was easy to convince her they hadn't survived. The old midwife took them far away for a payment. Monster! Margaret screamed, lunging at the foreman, only to be held back by Principal Warren. Thomas seemed to have aged 10 years in minutes. Where is my daughter, Raymond? I don't know. She went south, last I heard. Never had news after that. Nathan, who had listened wide-eyed, stepped forward. Miss Betty, she was a midwife, he said, voice shaking. She told us our mother thought we had passed, and that one day we'd find our way back. Thomas knelt before the boys, trembling hands touching their faces. You're my grandsons. His voice choked. Ethan pulled half a locket from under his shirt. Miss Betty said our mother had the other half. Thomas struggled to his feet and walked to a small wall. Safe. From it, he took out a velvet box. Inside was the other half of the locket. When joined, they formed the Anderson family crest. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers so much. Now continuing. The days that followed at Peaceful Haven Ranch were full of deep change. Raymond was removed and reported to the authorities for his crimes, while Thomas began an unrelenting search for Emily. Private detectives were hired to track any lead to his daughter's whereabouts. The twins, now recognized as Ethan and Nathan Anderson, were officially introduced to the community as the rancher's grandsons. The news spread fast, bringing both support and inevitable gossip. How will we find our mother? Ethan asked. One night, as Thomas tucked them into what was now officially their bedroom, We'll find her, son, their grandfather replied, determination in his voice. I made the mistake of pushing her away once. I won't rest until she's home. Nathan, always the quieter of the two, stayed silent, fiddling with the restored locket. What if she doesn't want to come back? He finally asked. What if she's still mad at you? Thomas sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. She'd have every right to be. I was a terrible father, too proud to see what truly mattered. But even if she doesn't forgive me, I'm sure she'll want to meet the two of you. Teacher Jessica became a constant presence at the ranch, helping the boys catch up on their lost studies. During one of these sessions, she made an important discovery. Nathan has an incredible gift for drawing, she remarked to Thomas, showing him the boy's sketches, just like Emily used to. Thomas examined the drawings with tears in his eyes. It's true. Emily could recreate any landscape after seeing it just once. One drawing in particular caught his attention, a small wooden house near a river with mountains in the background. What is this place, Nathan? The boy shrugged. I'm not sure. I dream about it sometimes. Ethan does too. It's where we lived before Miss Betty, Ethan added. At least I think so. I have flashes of it in my head. Thomas showed the drawing to Margaret, who studied it carefully. This landscape, it looks like the St. Joseph region in Vermont. The mountains have that distinctive shape. A new clue emerged when Principal Warren, researching local records, discovered that Betty, the midwife who raised the boys, had a sister still living in a nearby town. After much insistence, the woman revealed that Betty had lived in Vermont for some time before returning to the Sacramento area, bringing 2 babies with her. She never told me the full story, admitted Betty's sister. She only said those children had an important destiny and would one day need to know their roots. With this information, Thomas organized a trip to Vermont. Margaret insisted on joining them, arguing that the boys would need care during the journey. In truth, the housekeeper feared Thomas, in his eagerness, might make rash decisions. The trip was long and exhausting. The twins, who had never left, the region marveled at the changing landscapes, the mountain ranges, and finally, the cooler climate of St. Joseph. "It's just like in my drawing," Nathan exclaimed when they spotted the region's distinctive mountains. In St. Joseph, they stayed at a small inn. The owner, an elderly man named William, grew interested in their story when Thomas discreetly mentioned he was searching for news of his daughter. "A young blonde woman, blue eyes, must have arrived here about 7 or 8 years ago," William asked thoughtfully. "Could it be Emily, who teaches music at the elementary school? She came here sick, barely able to stand. It was Mrs. Florence who took her in." Thomas's heart raced. "Where can we find this Mrs. Florence?" Florence's house was on the outskirts of town, a simple but cozy building. The white-haired woman greeted them with initial suspicion, which turned to surprise when she saw the twins. "Good heavens," she exclaimed. "They look just like her." Thomas briefly explained who they were and what they were searching for. Florence listened in silence, her eyes fixed on the boys. "Emily arrived here broken," she finally said. "Not just physically, but with a shattered heart. Her man had convinced her that her babies had died after birth. She tried—" Florence paused, glancing at the boys. Understanding, Margaret took the children to explore the garden, while Thomas and Florence continued their conversation. "She tried to take her own life," the woman went on. "That's why I took her in to care for her. It took months to convince her that life was worth living. Music saved her. She started giving lessons to my grandchildren, then was invited to teach at the elementary school." "Is she still here?" Thomas's voice faltered. Florence shook her head. "About a year ago she left. She said she needed to find answers, that something told her there was more to her story than she imagined. She mentioned going back to the region where she was born. And where exactly did she go? She never told me clearly, only that she would head north into the interior of California." Thomas felt the weight of the irony. While he traveled south in search of his daughter, she was possibly going the opposite way. "Did she leave any contact? Anything that could help us find her?" Florence hesitated. "She kept a diary. When she left, she gave it to me, saying that one day I might need it. I think that day has come." Emily's diary was a simple notebook, filled with thoughts, poems, and drawings. Many pages were dedicated to the pain of losing her children. Others spoke of longing for the ranch where she grew up. The most recent entries, however, showed growing restlessness. "I dreamed of them," again, said an entry from months ago. "Two blonde boys running through a field. They weren't babies, but grown children. I feel they're alive somewhere. I need to find them." The last page held a decision. "I'm going back, not to confront my father or Raymond, but to uncover what really happened that night. Miss Betty, the midwife, if she's still alive, must have answers. I'll start in Gardenville, where she had relatives." Gardenville was a small town less than an hour from Sacramento, near Peaceful Haven Ranch. "We've been so close all this time," Thomas lamented. In one of the diary's pages, they found a photograph of Emily in St. Joseph, standing in front of the school where she taught. Thomas barely recognized his daughter. Her face, once cheerful and carefree, now bore marks of suffering and forced maturity. But her beauty remained, as did the blue eyes identical to the twins. When Margaret showed the photo to the boys, both fell silent for a long moment. "I dream about her," Nathan finally said, "singing that piano song." "Me too," Ethan agreed, "but I thought they were just dreams." The next day they hurried back to California. The anxiety was so great that Thomas could barely drive, needing to switch with Margaret for stretches of the trip. Arriving at the ranch, they found Frank, the trusted ranch hand, with news. "Mr. Thomas, a woman was here looking for you." She wouldn't give her name, but she asked about 2 boys who might be at the ranch. The rancher's heart nearly stopped. "What did she look like?" "Blonde, light eyes, probably in her early 30s. She seemed very worn and nervous. When I said you'd traveled with the children, she got upset and left, said she'd come back." "Do you know where she went?" Frank pointed toward the village. "Looked like she was heading to Mr. Jenkins' inn." Without wasting time, Thomas asked Margaret to stay with the boys while he went to the village. The small local inn was the only place visitors could stay. Jenkins, the owner, confirmed a woman matching that description had rented a room the day before. "She left early today and hasn't returned," he said. "Booked the room for a week. Seemed determined to wait for someone." Thomas left a message, asking her to reach out as soon as she returned, and went back to the ranch, torn between hope and fear. What if Emily rejected him? What if she didn't believe the twins were her children? At dusk, as they prepared dinner, they heard the sound of a car approaching. Thomas rushed to the porch, followed by the boys and Margaret. A taxi stopped in the yard. Out stepped a woman with blonde hair tied in a simple bun, wearing modest clothes. Despite the changes brought by time and sorrow, Thomas immediately recognized his daughter. "Emily." The name escaped his lips like a prayer. The woman froze when she saw him. Her eyes, however, quickly fixed on the two children beside their father. "My God," she murmured, bringing her hands to her face. "It's true then." The twins looked at her with a mix of fascination and instinctive recognition. Emily took a step forward, then another, moving as if in a dream. She knelt before the boys, her tear-filled eyes tracing every detail of their faces. Slowly, she removed a thin cord from around her neck. Hanging from it was half of a locket. "I always knew," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Deep in my heart, I always knew you had survived." Ethan was the first to move. He pulled the complete locket from inside his shirt. "Miss Betty said one day we'd find our mother," he said simply. "She never lied to us." Emily opened her arms, unable to hold back her tears. The boys hesitated only a moment before throwing themselves into the embrace they had unknowingly waited for their entire lives. Thomas watched the scene from a distance, giving them the sacred moment of reunion. Silent tears streamed down his weathered face. When Emily finally looked up at her father, there was no hatred in her gaze, only deep sadness and unanswered questions. How did you find them?" she asked. "They found me," Thomas replied. "They showed up at the ranch gate asking for work. Seems they always knew the way back home." That night was filled with long conversations in the main house. Emily spoke of the difficult years after her departure, the depression that followed believing she had lost her children, and the slow rebuilding of her life in Vermont. "When Raymond told me my babies hadn't survived, something inside me died," she said, holding her son's hands. "I spent years just existing, not really living. It wasn't until I started having recurring dreams of two children that I found the strength to uncover the truth." "How did you discover they might be alive?" Margaret asked. "I found an old friend of the midwife who attended me. She mentioned that Miss Betty had left with two children, said she always thought it was strange, but never had the courage to question it." The twins, in turn, shared stories of their life with Miss Betty. The tales she told about their mother and how she always assured them they would one day know their true roots. "When she got very sick, she made us promise to come to this region," Nathan explained. "She said we'd find answers at Peaceful Haven Ranch. She didn't say it was our grandfather, just that we had to come work here." Thomas, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did, the way I treated you, was unforgivable." Emily looked at her father for a long moment. "For a long time, I hated you," she admitted honestly. "But hatred is too heavy a burden to carry for so long. When I decided to return, it wasn't to confront you, it was to find answers. And maybe so we could try to understand each other. I have so much to make up for," Thomas murmured, his voice thick. "We have time now," Emily replied with a small smile. "If these two stubborn boys found their way back, I think we can find ours too." The following weeks brought significant changes for everyone. Emily decided to stay at the ranch, gradually reclaiming her place in the family and the property. The twins, now officially Ethan and Nathan Anderson, flourished under the care of their mother and grandfather. Raymond was tried for his crimes, facing not only charges related to Emily's case, but also years of fraud against the ranch. The community, initially divided by rumors, slowly embraced the truth and offered support to the reunited family. One afternoon, as the twins helped train the horses, a task they performed with extraordinary natural skill, Emily and Thomas watched from the porch. "They look so much like you at that age," the rancher remarked. "The same way with animals, the same determination." Emily smiled. "But they have their grandfather's stubbornness, especially Ethan." "Have you learned anything about their father?" Thomas asked hesitantly, a subject they hadn't yet discussed in depth. Emily's smile faded. "Michael worked at the neighboring ranch when we met. When I told him about the pregnancy, he promised to take responsibility, that he'd talk to you. Instead, he disappeared the next day. I later found out Raymond had threatened him and paid him to leave." Thomas lowered his head, ashamed of the role his foreman had played with his silent permission, destroying so many lives. "If I could go back—" "We can't," Emily gently interrupted, "but we can move forward, building something better than what we lost." At the start of summer, Peaceful Haven Ranch opened its doors for a grand celebration. For the first time in decades, the property welcomed neighbors, friends, and workers to celebrate the twins' 8th birthday. The once gloomy and silent house now overflowed with life and music. Emily played the old piano while the boys, dressed in new clothes with neatly combed hair, though already tousled from play, ran among the guests. Margaret, wearing her finest dress, proudly served the treats she had prepared. Frank and the other workers, initially hesitant about the ranch's new dynamic, now joined the festivities with enthusiasm. During the celebration, Mrs. Florence, the woman who had taken Emily in during her time in Vermont, arrived unexpectedly. "I couldn't miss this moment," she said, embracing Emily. "I knew you'd find your way." Principal Warren and Jessica from the local school were also there, proud of the twins' progress, as they now stood out among the top students. As the sun began to set, Thomas asked for everyone's attention. Holding hands with his daughter and grandsons, he made an announcement. "Today, we're not just celebrating the birthday of these two remarkable boys who changed our lives. We're celebrating a new beginning for Peaceful Haven Ranch and our family." Turning to Emily, he continued, "My daughter made it official today. She's taking over the ranch's management. With her degree in agronomy and the energy only she has, I'm certain she'll take this property to new heights." The news was met with enthusiastic applause. Emily, who had completed her studies in Vermont, had already shown an innovative vision for the ranch. "And there's more," Thomas added. "Part of the ranch will become a rural educational center where children from the area can learn not just about farming and livestock, but also music, art, and literature. The Emily Anderson Rural Educational Center will open next semester." The idea, born from conversations between Emily and her former mentor, Mrs. Florence, aimed to combine their experiences to offer opportunities to children who, like the twins once had, needed support to develop their talents. As the guests celebrated, Ethan pulled Nathan aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "Remember when we first got here?" he asked, looking at the property that was now their home. "I remember," Nathan replied. "I was terrified that angry man would send us away. Do you think Miss Betty knew that we'd find our mother and grandfather?" Nathan nodded. "I'm sure she did. She always said we had an important destiny." "I miss her," Ethan admitted. "Me too. But I think she'd be happy to see us now." The brothers watched the celebration from a distance, their mother playing the piano, their grandfather chatting animatedly with the guests, Margaret overseeing the treats like a general commanding troops. "We're a strange family, aren't we?" Ethan remarked with a smile. "The best family," Nathan corrected, "put together our own way." When the sky began filling with stars, Emily found her son sitting on the porch, gazing upward. "What are you two up to out here alone? Your party's inside." "We were thinking about Miss Betty," Ethan answered, "and how she prepared us to find you." Emily sat between them. "One day we'll visit the place where she's resting and thank her in person. If it weren't for her, we might never have found each other." "What about our father?" Nathan asked, addressing the subject directly for the first time. "Will we ever get to meet him?" Emily hesitated. It was a question she knew would come eventually. "If you want, we can try to find him. But no matter what, You have me, your grandfather, Margaret. You have a family that loves you more than anything." She pulled her sons close, looking up at the stars. "You know what Miss Betty used to say?" Nathan asked. "That even when people lose each other, the stars always show the way back." Emily smiled through her tears. She was right. You found your way back. All of us did. From afar, Thomas watched. The scene, his daughter embracing his grandsons, the three of them sharing secrets under the stars. Feeling the weight of years and mistakes, but also the lightness of forgiveness and redemption, he approached slowly. "Is there room for one more in this conversation?" he asked timidly. Emily reached out, inviting him to join them. "Always, Dad, always." Peaceful Haven Ranch, which for so many years had been a place of silence and bitterness, now overflowed with laughter and music. The wounds of the past, though they left scars, were beginning to heal. And the twins who had arrived begging for work had found far more. They had found their place in the world, their story, and finally, their complete family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now continuing, 3 years had passed since that reunion which forever changed life at Peaceful Haven Ranch. The twins, now 11, grew strong and healthy, balancing studies at the local school with responsibilities on the property. Ethan, always the more outgoing, had become their natural spokesman. Nathan, more observant and thoughtful, had found his voice in art. His drawings were even gaining recognition in the state capital. Emily had solidified her role as the ranch's manager, implementing modern techniques that significantly increased productivity without sacrificing sustainability. The educational program she'd created now served over 50 children in the Wu area, offering not just tutoring but also workshops in music, art, and culture. Thomas, in turn, had found new purpose as his grandson's mentor. His life experience, now tempered by hard-earned humility, became valuable lessons for the boys. "Grandpa, tell us again what the ranch was like when you were little," Ethan asked one Sunday afternoon as they fished in the creek running through the property. Thomas smiled, adjusting his fishing line. "Back then, we didn't have all this technology. The harvest was done by hand, grain by grain. My father and 5 workers handled everything." Was the ranch smaller? Nathan asked, sketching the landscape in his notebook instead of fishing. "Much smaller. It was my father who started expanding, buying neighboring land. I continued his work." "And will we keep doing Mom's work when we grow up?" asked Ethan. Thomas affectionately ruffled his grandson's hair. "If that's what you want, what matters is that you do what you love." The peace of that family afternoon was interrupted by the arrival of Frank, now promoted to foreman, carrying an envelope. "Miss Emily, this came for you. The messenger said it's important." Emily, who was resting under the shade of a nearby tree, took the envelope with curiosity. As she opened it, her face turned pale. "What is it, Mom?" asked Nathan, always sensitive to emotional shifts. It's from the investigation office," she replied, her voice trembling. "It seems they found Michael." Thomas approached, concerned by his daughter's reaction. "What does it say exactly?" "He's in Denver. He has a small farm there, lives alone. The investigator tracked him down through an old co-worker." The twins exchanged glances, a silent conversation only they understood. "Will we get to meet him?" Ethan finally asked. Emily carefully folded the letter, needing time to gather her thoughts. "If you want to, yes. I'll reach out to him first, explain the situation. He doesn't know about you. He believed what Raymond told him." That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Emily and Thomas talked at length on the porch. "I'm scared, Dad," she confessed. "What if he rejects the boys? They've already been through so much." "And what if he doesn't?" Thomas countered. "We can't decide for him, just as we can't decide for the boys. They have the right to know their father." Emily nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her father's words, wisdom hard-earned through his own mistakes. "I'll write to him tomorrow." Michael's reply arrived 2 weeks later in a plain envelope. Emily opened it with trembling hands, reading silently before sharing the contents with her father and sons. He wants to meet us," she said finally. He says he never fully believed the story Raymond told, but was threatened and afraid, that he regrets every day for not staying and fighting for us. And now? Asked Thomas. He asks if he can come here. Says he'll understand if I refuse, but would really like to meet his sons. The twins, sitting on the living room sofa, absorbed every word, their expressions mixed anxiety, curiosity, and a touch of apprehension. What do you think? Emily asked her sons directly. This is a decision that affects you two the most. Ethan, as always, was the first to respond. I want to meet him. Nathan, after a moment of reflection, nodded in agreement. Me too. Michael's arrival was scheduled for the end of the month. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with nerves and preparation. Emily alternated between anticipation and worry for her sons. The twins, despite their calm appearances, asked more questions about their biological father than they ever had before. How did you two meet? Ethan wanted to know during dinner 3 days before the scheduled date. Emily smiled at the memory. At a town festival, his father's farm supplied milk to the dairy that bought our coffee. We met in line at the dessert buffet. He tried to take the last slice of pie I wanted. And who got the pie? Nathan asked, amused. We split it, Emily replied, her eyes shining at the memory. That's how it started. Thomas, who had been listening quietly, added, he was a good man, hard-working, responsible. I was the one who didn't give him a fair chance, blinded by my pride. Finally, on a sunny Saturday morning, an unfamiliar car pulled into the ranch's yard. The twins, who had been waiting anxiously on the porch since dawn, instinctively held on to each other. From the vehicle stepped a man of average height, with brown hair slightly graying at the temples, his face weathered by sun and labor. He wore simple clothes, clean and neatly pressed, and carried a small package in each hand. Emily stepped out of the house slowly, as if each step required a conscious decision. Thomas remained a few paces behind, respecting the moment, but ready if needed. Emily, said the man, his voice thick with emotion, you look beautiful. Hello, Michael, she replied, trying to maintain her composure. It's been a long time. His gaze shifted to the two boys watching from the porch. Are they? He whispered. Emily nodded, gesturing for the twins to come closer. Ethan, Nathan, this is Michael, your father. The boys moved forward slowly, studying the man before them intently. The silence that followed seemed endless until Ethan, always the more direct, broke it. Do you like horses? A hesitant smile crossed Michael's tense face. I do. I have 3 at my ranch. We do too, the boy replied. We take care of the horses here at the ranch. I heard you have a special way with them, Michael said, crouching to their level. That comes from your mother. She always had a magic touch with animals. He held out the small packages he was carrying. I brought something for you. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so... The boys unwrapped the packages simultaneously, revealing 2 identical wristwatches, simple but handsome. My father gave me one like this when I turned 10, Michael explained. I thought, well, it's a tradition in my family. Nathan, usually the more reserved, was the first to thank him, extending his wrist so his father could help fasten the watch. Ethan followed his brother's lead. The simple gesture broke the initial tension. Thomas invited everyone inside, where Margaret had prepared a special breakfast. At the table, the conversation flowed surprisingly naturally. Michael spoke about his life in Denver, the small ranch where he raised horses and grew vegetables. The twins, in turn, eagerly shared stories of their adventures on the ranch and at school. After breakfast, the boys insisted on showing their father around the property. They took him to the stables, the orchard, the creek where they often fished. Michael followed them with visible emotion, absorbing every detail, every story. Emily watched from a distance, giving them space to build their own relationship. They seem to be getting along, Thomas remarked, joining his daughter under the shade of a jaboticaba tree. The boys have generous hearts. They take after their grandfather, Emily replied, holding her father's hand. The best parts of him. As evening fell and they prepared for dinner, Michael asked for a moment alone with Emily. They walked to the artificial lake Thomas had built years ago to celebrate his daughter's birth. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he said, breaking the silence. "I know I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance, Michael. I learned that the hard way." "The boys are extraordinary. You've done an amazing job." Emily shook her head. "They're extraordinary on their own. They've been through so much, and they only had me for 3 years. Before that, it was Miss Betty who raised them with all her love." "I wish I could have met her," Michael said. "To thank her in person." They stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the sunset's reflection on the calm water. "Emily," Michael began hesitantly, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd like to be part of their lives, in whatever way you'll allow." "That isn't just my decision," she answered honestly. "It's mostly theirs. If they want it, I won't stand in the way." "And what about us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Is there any possibility?" Emily took a deep breath. "A lot has happened, Michael. I'm not the same person. You once knew. We need to take this slow, one step at a time." He nodded, respecting her answer. "I'll be here, for as long as it takes." During the following week, Michael stayed at the village inn, visiting the ranch daily. The twins quickly grew accustomed to his presence, incorporating him into their routine. Emily, initially reserved, gradually let her guard down as she saw Michael's sincere efforts to know and understand their children. The day before his departure, Michael gathered the whole family in the living room. "I need to return to Denver tomorrow," he announced. "I have animals to care for and work commitments, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to make a proposal." The twins looked at him expectantly. "During your next school break, would you like to spend a few weeks with me at the farm? Meet your other grandparents, my parents, who don't even know yet that they're great-grandparents." Ethan and Nathan exchanged excited glances, but turned to their mother for approval. Emily hesitated only for a moment. "If that's what you want, it's fine with me." "You're coming too, right, Mom?" asked Nathan, always mindful of others' feelings. Emily looked at Michael, who seemed equally anxious for her answer. "We can discuss the details closer to the date," she replied, diplomatically. When Michael left the next morning, the twins, once so apprehensive, said goodbye with tight hugs and promises to call regularly. The man got into his car with misty eyes, waving until the dust of the road swallowed him. "He seems nice," Ethan commented as they walked back home. "Different than I imagined." "How did you imagine him?" Emily asked curiously. The boy shrugged. "I don't know. Scarier, maybe? After all, he left you alone." Emily hugged her son. "Sometimes people make mistakes out of fear, sweetheart. That doesn't mean they're bad people." "Like Grandpa?" asked Nathan. "Was he scared too?" "Yes, just like Grandpa. Sometimes fear makes us do things that hurt the ones we love. What matters is recognizing the mistake and trying to make it right." Thomas, who had been walking slightly behind, listening quietly, stepped closer. "Your mother's right," he said, placing his hands on his grandson's shoulders. "I was a foolish, proud old man, but I got a second chance thanks to you two." The months that followed brought a new dynamic to the family. Michael called regularly, talking at length with the boys about their daily lives and interests, slowly building the relationship that time and circumstances had stolen. Emily, initially reserved during these calls, gradually began to participate more. The conversations, once focused solely on the boys, soon included discussions about the future, plans, and even shared memories from the past. As the school break approached, excitement and nerves took hold of the twins. It would be the first time they'd be away from the ranch and their mother for so long. "What if they don't like us?" fretted Nathan, referring to the paternal grandparents they'd never met. "It's impossible not to like you," Emily reassured them as she helped pack their bags. "Besides, your father has already told them all about you. They can't wait to meet you." "You really are coming with us, right?" Ethan insisted for the 10th time. Emily nodded. After much reflection and long talks with her father, she had decided to join them on the trip, not just for the boys but for herself too, to close old chapters and perhaps open new ones. Thomas, though sad to be alone for 2 weeks, fully supported her decision. "Go, my daughter. See where this journey might take you. Margaret and I will take care of everything here." The trip to Denver marked the beginning of a new chapter in the twins' lives. Michael's small farm, though much smaller than Peaceful Haven Ranch, enchanted them immediately. A simple yet well-kept place with horses, a small vegetable garden, and plenty of space to explore. Their paternal grandparents, Walter and Barbara, welcomed their grandchildren with tears in their eyes. Simple country folks, they had never imagined their son would give them such special grandchildren. "They look just like you when you were a boy, Michael," Barbara remarked, hugging the boys. To Emily's surprise, Michael's parents received her with the same warmth, without judgment, for the past. "Thank you for giving us the chance to know them," Barbara said, holding Emily's hands. "Michael told us everything, how much he regretted it, the pain you both went through. We're here now as a family." Those vacations turned into a time of healing and new discoveries. Ethan and Nathan met cousins they never knew they had, learned family traditions from their father's side, and heard stories about him as a child. Emily, in turn, reconnected with a part of her past she had buried, along with her pain. Little by little, she rediscovered in Michael the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Now more mature, wiser, marked by his own struggles and regrets. One starry night, sitting on the farmhouse porch after the boys had fallen asleep, Michael finally asked the question that had lingered in the air since their reunion. "Is there still a place for me in your life, Emily? Not just as the boys, father, but as something more?" Emily looked up at the stars, remembering the winding path that had brought her there. "It won't be easy, Michael. We have too many scars, too much history between us." "I'm not asking for easy," he replied. "I'm asking for possible." Emily smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "Possible. That I can promise. One day at a time." When they returned to Peaceful Haven Ranch, they brought not only memories of the trip, but also Michael, who had taken time off work to spend another week with his sons. Thomas greeted them at the entrance, watching the four of them step out of the car, the father, his daughter, and the grandsons, a family that against all odds had found their way back to each other. "Welcome back," he said, hugging his grandchildren first, then his daughter. He extended his hand to Michael, who shook it firmly. "Welcome to our home." The sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The horses grazed peacefully in the fields. The workers returned from a day's labor, and Margaret hummed in the kitchen as she prepared dinner. Life, with its mysterious wisdom, had woven the broken threads of that family back together. That evening, gathered around the dinner table, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "To what we've lost, to what we've found, and to what's yet to come." The twins, sitting side by side as always, exchanged knowing smiles. From the makeshift shelter in the workers' shed to the center of the grand farmhouse table, their journey had been long and difficult, but every step had led them exactly where they were meant to be. "To family," they all repeated, their voices joining in unison, like the stars that, even after drifting apart, always find their way back to one another. Life at Peaceful Haven Ranch settled into a new rhythm in the following years. Michael, after many conversations and reflections with Emily, decided to sell his small farm in Denver and move to a property near the Anderson Ranch. The closeness allowed him to spend time with his sons daily without imposing on the family dynamic Emily and Thomas had built. His parents, Walter and Barbara, initially reluctant to leave their hometown, eventually gave in to their desire to be near their grandchildren. They sold their small property and bought a comfortable house in the village near the ranch. "I never thought I'd trade Colorado for California at 70, Walter would often remark, though the sparkle in his eyes as he watched his grandchildren betrayed no regret. The relationship between Emily and Michael evolved slowly, with caution and mutual respect. They didn't immediately rekindle their romantic relationship, preferring to first rebuild a solid friendship and co-parenting partnership. "Sometimes we need to take 2 steps back before moving forward," Emily explained to Margaret when the housekeeper asked, with the frankness only years of familiarity allowed, if the two would get back together. "But you still care for each other." That's as clear as day," the housekeeper insisted. Emily smiled, watching through the window as Michael taught the twins how to fix a fence. "Yes, we still care for each other. But now we have so much more to lose than two young lovers did years ago. We need to be sure. The Emily Anderson Rural Educational Center, initially a modest idea, grew beyond expectations. What had started as a project serving local children in one of the renovated ranch buildings now occupied a dedicated facility built specifically for the purpose. "I never imagined we'd have over 100 students in just 2 years," Emily remarked to her father during the center's anniversary celebration. "You underestimate your own talent, my dear," Thomas replied, watching proudly as the children performed a play in the small outdoor amphitheater. "Your project is transforming the region." It was true. Beyond regular educational activities, the center now offered vocational courses for young adults, craft workshops for women in the community, and even a literacy program for elderly farm workers. Margaret, who had initially only supervised the kitchen feeding the students, discovered an unexpected calling as a cooking instructor. Her classes became so popular, there was a waiting list. "Who'd have thought at 68 I'd be teaching folks how to bake a cake?" she laughed, while guiding a group of teenagers in the center's industrial kitchen. Frank, the former ranch hand promoted to foreman after Raymond's departure, proved not only an excellent manager, but also a skilled storyteller. His Tales by the Fire on Friday afternoons gathered children and adults alike to listen to legends and country yarns. "You ought to write these stories down, Mr. Frank," Nathan suggested once after a particularly gripping tale about the fire snake of Sacramento woods. "Right?" Frank scratched his head, embarrassed. "I can barely sign my name, son." "But now—" "Oh, you can learn," the boy insisted. Mom opened adult literacy classes at the center. To everyone's surprise, Frank took on the challenge. At 56, he sat in a classroom for the first time, determined to master the letters that had always seemed so mysterious. Within a year, not only had he learned to read and write fluently, but he'd also begun recording his stories in a notebook with Nathan's help, who volunteered as his literary assistant. "I'm thinking of publishing a little book with Frank's stories," Emily mentioned to Thomas and Michael over dinner. "It'd be a great way to celebrate local culture and encourage other adults to pursue education." "Brilliant idea," Michael agreed. "I can talk to a friend of mine in Denver who works in independent publishing." The news spread through the community, sparking excitement. Others began sharing their own stories, creating a rich collection of local memories that Emily envisioned turning into a series of publications. The twins, now 13 years old, were developing increasingly distinct personalities, though they remained inseparable. Ethan, outgoing and practical, excelled in sports and activities requiring leadership. He had already participated in regional equestrian competitions, bringing pride to the family. Nathan, more introspective and sensitive, found his means of expression in art. His drawings, initially simple sketches of daily life, had evolved into works that demonstrated exceptional talent. "Your style reminds me of Emily in her youth," Thomas remarked as he flipped through his grandson's sketchbook. She too captured not just the images, but the feelings behind them. The mention of the resemblance left Nathan beaming. His admiration for his mother was evident, as was his desire to follow in her footsteps in some ways. Peaceful Haven Ranch, under Emily's management and the occasional consulting of Michael, was thriving like never before. The incorporation of sustainable farming techniques had not only increased productivity, but also made the property a regional benchmark. "Mr. Anderson, you must be so proud," commented a neighboring rancher during an agricultural fair where the ranch's products were on display. "Your daughter has turned Peaceful Haven into the most modern property in the area without losing its traditions." Thomas smiled, watching Emily explain to a group of visitors the planting techniques that blended traditional wisdom with innovation. "She's the one who should be proud," he replied. "She did all this despite me, not because of me." "Don't be so hard on yourself," interjected Margaret, who was passing by with a tray of treats for the visitors. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is recognizing them and changing." The housekeeper, who had faithfully served the Anderson family for over 4 decades, was the only one who allowed herself such liberties with her employer. Their relationship had long surpassed the formal boundaries of employee and employer, becoming more like a familial friendship. It was during that same fair that an unexpected incident brought painful memories to the surface. Raymond, who had served a reduced sentence for his crimes and had recently been released, appeared drunk at the exhibition, causing a scene. "Look at the happy family," he shouted, staggering between the stalls, "all pretending everything's fine now." Security tried to restrain him, but the former foreman continued. "Mr. Anderson, do you think a few food baskets for the poor erase what you did? And you, Emily, so sweet helping everyone. Did you forget you abandoned your sons? Ethan and..." Nathan, who were nearby, rushed to their mother's side, bewildered by the scene. "Who is that man, Mom?" Nathan asked, holding Emily's hand. "Someone who hurt our family deeply," she replied, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Thomas approached Raymond as security tried to remove him. "You've caused enough suffering, Raymond. Leave before I forget my age and do something I'll regret. You think you can fool everyone with this act of a happy family?" the former foreman continued as he was dragged away. "Everyone in this town knows the truth." When the situation calmed down, the family gathered in a quieter corner of the fair. The twins, shaken by what had happened, demanded explanations. "Was he talking about Mom abandoning us?" Ethan asked, outraged. "But he's the one who deceived everyone." Emily hugged her sons, searching for the right words. "It's true I wasn't with you in your early years. I believed a terrible lie, but I never, not for a moment, abandoned you in my heart. I searched for you as soon as I had the strength and reason to believe you might be alive." "I know, Mom," Nathan replied, always the more sensitive to others' feelings. "We never doubted that." Michael, who had watched the scene from afar, cautiously approached. "Is everything all right? Can I help with anything?" "We're fine," Emily assured. "We just need to go home a little earlier." On the way back, a heavy silence hung in the car. It was Thomas who finally broke it. "Maybe it's time we tell you everything, with no omissions. You're old enough to understand." That night, gathered in the living room of the big house, Emily, Thomas, and Michael recounted with painful honesty all the details that had been softened in previous versions of the family history. Thomas's unyielding pride that had led him to banish his pregnant daughter, Michael's fear in the face of Raymond's threats, Emily's deep depression after believing she had lost her children, the calculated manipulation of the former foreman who had profited financially from the family's separation. "Why are you telling us this now, Grandpa?" Ethan asked after listening quietly. "Because you deserve to know the full truth," his grandfather replied. "And because we shouldn't be afraid to face our mistakes, no matter how painful they are. That's what I've learned from you two." Nathan, who had been listening intently, suddenly stood up and hugged his grandfather. "Thank you for trusting us," he said simply. That frank conversation, though difficult, strengthened the family bonds even further. The twins, now aware of the full extent of the suffering and mistakes made by the adults they loved, developed a more mature understanding of forgiveness and redemption. In the months that followed, the family faced another challenge. A large agribusiness company began pressuring landowners in the region to sell their properties. The plan was to establish extensive sugarcane monoculture, which would threaten not only the local environmental balance, but also the way of life of small farms. "They're offering a lot of money, Mr. Anderson," Frank remarked during a meeting with other landowners at the ranch headquarters. "Some folks won't be able to resist." "I understand the temptation," Thomas replied, "but if we sell, what will happen to the families who've depended on these lands for generations? To our educational center? To the whole community we've built?" The situation grew more complicated when they discovered that some local officials had been co-opted by the company, fast-tracking environmental permits and pressuring small landowners. "We need to organize," Emily proposed during a family dinner, "not just to resist, but to offer viable alternatives to the small farmers being pressured." And so the Peaceful Haven Cooperative was born, an initiative uniting small and mid-sized producers in the region. The idea was to share resources, technology, and knowledge to increase productivity and profitability, making the farms economically viable without the need to sell. Michael, with his experience managing small farms, became a key figure in the project. He traveled across the region, talking to farmers and explaining the benefits of cooperation. "You have a gift for this," Walter commented, watching his son speak with a group of farmers hesitant about the idea. "You've always known how to speak the language of country folk." The twins, despite their young age, became actively involved in the cause. Ethan accompanied his father and grandfather on visits to farms, learning about agricultural management and negotiations. Meanwhile, Nathan created explanatory materials about the cooperative's benefits and the environmental harm of the planned monoculture. "I'm impressed by your dedication," Emily remarked, watching her sons work late on a school project about rural sustainability. "But don't forget you're still teenagers and need time for other things too." "This is important, Mom," Ethan replied, with unusual seriousness for his age. "It's our future. The ranch, the people here, all of this matters to us." The fight against the agribusiness company dragged on for months with ups and downs. The cooperative grew, but it also faced resistance from more traditionalist landowners and external pressures. It was during this turbulent time that the relationship between Emily and Michael finally deepened into something more meaningful. Working side by side for their shared cause, they rediscovered not only the affection they felt for each other, but also the mutual admiration that grew from witnessing each other's strengths and how they handled adversity. "You two aren't fooling anyone," Margaret teased one night when she found them talking on the porch, long after everyone else had gone to bed. "You're closer than two peas in a pod." Emily blushed like a teenager. "We're just talking about the cooperative." "Margaret." Sure, the housekeeper replied with a knowing smile as she walked away. "I'll make some tea. It's too cold out for cooperative talk." When they were alone again, Michael laughed. "I think we're being obvious." "We've never been able to hide anything from her," Emily agreed. "Even when I was a teenager, she always knew when I was up to something." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the nighttime sounds of the ranch. "Emily," Michael finally said, turning to face her, "it's been almost 3 years since we found each other again. We've worked together, raised our kids together, fought for important causes together. I think we can stop pretending we're just good friends and co-parents." Emily smiled, her heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. "Then what would we be? A couple, a real family, like we were always meant to be." Emily looked out at the property bathed in moonlight, at the house where she had grown up and was now raising her children, at the man fate had taken away and then brought back to her. "Yes," she replied simply, lacing her fingers with his. "It's about time." The news that Emily and Michael had officially rekindled their relationship spread quickly through the ranch and the community. The twins, contrary to what some might have expected, greeted the news with enthusiasm. "Took long enough," Ethan remarked with his usual bluntness. "You're not bothered?" Emily asked, worried about her son's reaction. "I know it's a big change." "Mom, we've waited for this our whole lives without even realizing it," Nathan replied with the wisdom that often surprised adults. "Seeing you together is like putting the last piece of a puzzle in place." Thomas, initially reserved about the matter, surprised everyone by offering Michael a permanent place in the main house. "This ranch has always been your home too, my dear," he told Emily. "And now it's time for us to be a real, complete family." Though tempting, the proposal sparked long discussions. Michael, aware of the situation's complexity, hesitated. "I don't want to rush things or force my presence," he explained. "Besides, your parents are already settled in the village house." After much thought, they reached a compromise. Emily and the twins would move into the old foreman's house, a smaller but comfortable building near the main house. There, she and Michael could build their family life with the kids, staying close to Thomas while still having the privacy they needed as a couple. The house was completely renovated with everyone's active involvement. Nathan designed the new spaces, surprising everyone with his talent for architecture. Ethan coordinated teams of workers with the ease of a born manager. Thomas oversaw everything, finding new purpose in the activity. "Never thought I'd be hammering and sawing at 75, he remarked to Margaret as they picked out curtains for the new house. "It's good for you," replied the housekeeper. "I haven't seen you so lively since before Emily left." On moving day, Thomas surprised everyone with a symbolic gesture. He gave Emily and Michael a framed picture, an enlarged reproduction of the photo of the four of them, him, Emily, Michael, and the twins, taken during Michael's first visit to the ranch. To remember that, even in the hardest times, we were all moving toward this moment, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily hugged her father tightly. Thank you for everything, Dad, for being a different person today than you were before. You're the one who taught me, my dear, you and those stubborn boys who showed up at my gate. Adjusting to their new life didn't happen overnight. There were changes to make, routines to establish, and small conflicts to resolve. Michael, used to living alone for so many years, had to learn to share spaces and decisions. Emily, independent out of necessity for so long, had to find a balance between autonomy and partnership. The twins, meanwhile, were experiencing the dynamics of a traditional family for the first time, with a father and mother present every day. It's weird having Dad scold us now too, Ethan remarked to his brother one night, after being reprimanded for coming home late from the village. But it's good, isn't it? Nathan replied. I mean, it's normal. It's what we always wanted. Gradually they found their rhythm. They developed their own traditions, like Friday dinners where each took turns cooking, with mixed results, especially when it was Ethan's turn, Sunday horseback rides across the ranch, and evening reading sessions where Michael revealed an unexpected talent for dramatic interpretation. In the village and surrounding area, the Anderson family's story had become almost legendary. The tale of separation, hardship, and reunion resonated deeply in the community, especially among the older folks, who saw echoes of their own family stories in it. You've told this story so many times, Nathan said to Mrs. Wilson, an 80-year-old woman who frequented the educational center. Don't you get tired of it? My dear, stories of redemption never grow old, she replied with the wisdom of her years. They remind us that we can always start over, no matter our age or past mistakes. The Peaceful Haven Cooperative, after nearly 2 years of hard work, finally achieved a major victory. The agribusiness company abandoned its plans for the region, facing not only organized resistance from local farmers, but also legal challenges over irregularities in their environmental permits. The success strengthened community ties even further. The cooperative, initially formed in response to a threat, became a transformative force in the area, improving the lives of hundreds of rural families. On a special Sunday, when the cooperative celebrated its 2nd anniversary, a big party was held at Peaceful Haven Ranch. Farmers from across the region, local officials, students from the educational center, and their families all gathered to celebrate. During the event, Emily surprised everyone with an announcement. Today, we're not just celebrating the cooperative's success, but also the launch of the first volume of the Heartland Memories collection, featuring the tales of our dear Frank. The old ranch hand, now a published author, couldn't hold back tears as he received the first copy of the book. Nathan, who had illustrated it, stood proudly beside him. I never thought I'd see my name in a book, Frank said, overcome with emotion. I only learned to read and write properly 2 years ago, and now this. The success of the project inspired other residents to share their stories, creating a rich archive of local culture that the educational center began incorporating into its curriculum. It was at that same party that Michael, to everyone's surprise, asked for Emily's hand in marriage. Not a formal planned proposal, but an impulse born from the moment and the emotion of seeing her speak with such enthusiasm about future projects. Marry me, Emily, he said simply, interrupting her speech about the cooperative's plans. We've wasted enough time already. The crowd, initially confused by the interruption, burst into applause when they realized what was happening. Emily, rarely at a loss for words, simply nodded, unable to hold back her tears. The twins ran to hug their parents, followed by Thomas, who looked younger and lighter than he had in years. Let's do it right here at the ranch, Emily decided as the spontaneous celebrations began to settle, with our whole community. And so it was. 2 months later, in the large courtyard of Peaceful Haven Ranch, Emily and Michael finally made official the union fate had interrupted so many years before. Not a lavish ceremony, but a genuine celebration that reflected the values and history of that family. The twins, dressed in matching suits for the last time, After this, each of you picks your own clothes, Nathan insisted, escorted their mother to the makeshift altar where Michael waited. Thomas, standing beside his son-in-law, seemed finally at peace with himself. Margaret, seated in the front row, made no effort to hide her tears of joy. Walter and Barbara, Michael's parents, watched everything with the quiet pride of those witnessing the fulfillment of an old dream. The party that followed lasted until dawn. Music, dancing, plentiful food, and above all, stories. Many stories shared between generations, keeping the memory of the past alive while celebrating the present and the future they were building together. When everyone had finally left, the family gathered on the porch of the main house for a moment of quiet contemplation. The sun rose on the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues that reflected across the ranch's vast fields. "Look at that," Emily said, wrapped in her now-husband's arms as she took in the view. "Isn't it perfect?" "Almost perfect," Nathan corrected, ever attentive to details. "Perfect would be—" He didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what he meant. Perfect would be if Miss Betty were there to see what her actions had made possible. The midwife who, with her wisdom and kindness, had saved not just 2 lives, but an entire family. "She is," Ethan said simply. "In some way she is." Thomas placed his hands on his grandson's shoulders, watching the sunrise that heralded not just a new day, but a new chapter for all of them. "You know what your grandmother Barbara always says?" he asked the boys. "That, when people are meant to be together, the universe opens every possible path to make it happen, even the most unexpected ones." Emily looked at her gathered family. Her father, once proud and unyielding, now wise and loving. The husband, Fate, had taken and then returned. The sons she had believed lost forever, who had almost miraculously found their way back. Loyal Margaret, who had remained a beacon through stormy times. "I think your grandmother is right," she replied, feeling a fullness she had never believed possible. "Some bonds are simply unbreakable." Ethan, ever practical, broke the contemplative moment. "This is all very nice, but I'm starving. Who's up for breakfast?" Everyone laughed, heading back inside together as the sun climbed higher, illuminating Peaceful Haven Ranch, and the family that, against all odds, had found their way back home. The end of the story. Dear listeners, you've just followed the emotional journey of the twins who found their true home. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced a touching family reunion. Don't forget to like this video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.